George Floyd protests had been happening, and I remember the 4th of July and the speech Frederick Douglass had written, what is the 4th of July to a slave, or what is your 4th of July to a slave, which I thought was like, that is very pointed, and holy Christmas, the man has a point. Oh, let's examine this. Okay, and then how do I want to bring that into the particular spread, not necessarily in an appropriative way, or hoping not to, but to explore, especially as someone who is not a person of color, as a white woman who's, a member of the oppressor class, whether I chose it or not at birth, I don't know.
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Elly Blue, the Vice President of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
So this week, we welcome special guest, Karen Krebser,
Hi.
Author of Tarot Through the Witch's Year.
Love this new book. Welcome,
Yay,
Karen.
thank you. It says 33 spreads for spiritual connection, and it is a collection of 33 tarot spreads, one for each of the 2 moon phases of the month, and then a tarot spread for each of the high holy days and the cross quarter days, and then a blue moon, because there's usually one blue moon a year. Sometimes they're not, because they're funky like that. Blue moons kind of do the blue moon thing. So assuming there's a blue moon in the year, there'll be 33. And 33 is a very magical number. And so I thought that was auspicious. And it's a book that I had the idea for. I've actually had the idea to do different spreads for quite a while. When I first started reading the tarot, I just kind of did the Celtic Cross spread, the 10-card spread that everybody does. And I didn't really realize that there was anything else you could do with the cards, that you just laid out your 10 cards and what you got was what you got. And then I started taking classes, and different teachers were doing different spreads, different things with the cards, just like putting the first one I remember was Wizard of Oz spread. So there was a card that was the wizard, and there was a card that was Dorothy, and then of course the 3 companions of Dorothy, and each one represented something different. I can't remember what they are now, sadly. I wish I could. But it was kind of an eye-opening experience because, right? I know.
When he's shocked by this news.
Shocked. But anyway, that you could learn all about whatever your question was just by separating out the cards according to question, and then also according to metaphor or character or symbol, color even, anything that meant something to you. Hello, sweetheart. So anyway, so that's kind of how I began putting together the idea of creating a spread for every month of the year. And then I started putting together the idea of, there's energies are different for the dark moon as well as the full moon, because the dark moons or the new moon, they are much more constrictive, more internal, obviously darker, because there's no moon in it's not that there's no moon in the sky, but we can't see it. The moon is in shadow, and so it's a good time, depending on the month of the year, to explore whatever the shadow is for the energy that month. Anyway, I decided I wanted to finish the book, and so began the effort of organizing it and creating a structure for it that was like more specifically how, I mean, I knew that I wanted to do two spreads per month, and then it worked out to be another spread maybe every 6 weeks or something. But I mean, what was I going to say? What was I going to ask? Is it okay that some of the questions are repeated? Because the spreads, coming up with different questions for each spread was not entirely what I was guided to, because the dark moon in, say, March is really not all that different than the dark moon in July. It just might be, a different, the energies might be more expansive or more intense in July, because, well, at least here, in the United States or in the Northern Hemisphere, it might be. And I remember for July when I was writing, I'd taken a week's vacation in Lake Tahoe, and it was the year there were fire. Everything was like, it's all on fire. It's all on fire.
Yep.
How do I examine the uncomfortable feelings, and am I celebrating my freedom at the expense of someone else's? And does my freedom cost someone else theirs? I mean, is that something that's going on? And at the same time, without going too deep, because I didn't want to assume that everyone was experiencing the events of the time in the same way that I was, and I didn't want to assume that I was speaking for anyone other than myself. So it got a little tricky and a little sticky, but it was a very, very important process for me to go through, to really take into account my own bias, to really begin to see my own bias. And I've gotten called woke a few times, and it's
the worst insult possible.
Oh my goodness!
Are you okay?
I'm like, oh my God, what is that?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm like, what do you even? First of all, I don't even think that as someone who's not a person of color, it doesn't apply to me. I mean, now it's become this sort of like epithet that's thrown at progressive liberals, and I'm like, well, do you guys even know what you're talking about? Do you? Because you kind of don't. I mean,
right.
But
Right.
just kind of a little bit. Just maybe step back and examine your crap. And anyway, getting off subject here, but anyway, so seeing what was possible with each month, and based on what kind of holidays we celebrated, and then each month, and then also the names of the moons, like for example the corn moon or the strawberry moon, or and these were of course names given to the full moons, and mostly they come from the Victorian era, but not all of them. Some of them come from exploration of and experience of the indigenous presence and celebrations of the particular time, or whichever month, like the buck moon and the horn moon and the wolf moon and all of that kind of thing. Anyway, so I tried to tap into that and bring some of that forward, and it just took longer than I thought, and you guys were so patient with me. Yay.
Oh,
thank you.
Oh, right. And it's coming back to me now. I vaguely remember being like that you had a personal crisis come up.
Yeah.
Undisclosed to me the particulars. It was just like something came up, like unrelated to the book, and I was, and I got bummed because I was like, the book's probably not going to happen now, like, which is usually what happens.
But
with
you
the personal
made it
crisis.
happen.
Oh,
Like 9 times out of 10, when somebody says, I need a big extension, that means it's not coming.
Oh.
So good on you for making it happen.
Thank you. And thank you for not telling me that. Because
I know, right? But
like,
maybe that would make you determined.
Well, what happened was that in March of 1920, why?
You're living.
Why
You're
am I
living in
I'm going like full F. Scott Fitzgerald. I need a gin and tonic, people. So my sister passed away. She'd been fighting breast cancer, and she and I both were diagnosed with breast cancer. And but mine was more of a what they could just. I had a mastectomy, and that took care of it. And I was yay! And so that was great. But my sister had one that was invasive and very aggressive, and she fought it until the last. And it just was very devastating losing her. And then on top of the situation with my brother, and then just as a finishing up this kind of story of me, my mom passed 2 months ago.
Sorry.
So thank you. You guys are so sweet. No, I also cancer. So if I ever meet cancer, I'm gonna kick it in the dick. I'm sorry, burn my French.
Words with it.
Yes, we're gonna have words. But I'm. So it's just been a very difficult 5 years, and I hung on to the book because there was a part of me that was like, I'm not giving this up. I'm not giving this up. This is for me. This is something I'm doing for myself.
It seems like you became even more motivated in difficult times.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
But so why did you feel like a book was the correct format for expressing your ideas or communicating what you had to say?
Well, I've always been a book person. And so, actually, a drama person too. You may not realize it about me, but I am quite dramatic. Yes. I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. Yes, I know. I just need a feather boa and, again, a gin and tonic, and I'm all set.
We got a cute dog and a copy of your book.
Yes, we're
Close
good.
enough.
That's good enough. But anyway, the idea of writing a book has always been present for me. I actually had an idea for a book earlier, a dream dictionary.
Oh.
And this was like, 20 years ago maybe. And the name of it was Cut the Crap, a non-foofy dream dictionary for, some kind of, just kind of getting to the heart of dream symbolism. And so it didn't go anywhere, but the idea of somehow creating a literary work has always been something that I've wanted to do. And now the next thing I'm working on is a play. So kind of getting that drama in, going on my drama side. But it could, there's another book in here too.
Oh yeah, sure.
But as for, there are a great deal of books about tarot, more and more coming out about them every day. And I, so many out there that are so amazing already. And I know people who are actually writing more right now. And it's about somehow finding a way to express something new about the tarot that's been with us since the 1919s, 1920s. Arthur Waite, Pamela Coleman Smith, and the other guy. I always forget the other guy. Writer. whoever, I'm assuming he's the publisher. What else? Yes,
Ryder.
Dr.
Allegedly, they both created it, but, who knows what actually happened. I mean, this is like, if you have been following this is all wildly in dispute, like, in every inch of it. If you want to fall down a rabbit hole,
yes,
you could read about it for months.
Oh, yes, and there are some people that I've studied with who are actually good friends. They've been working on books of their own and have been studying this material for 40, 50 years, and the stories and the stories about, oh, I'm sorry, honey. I'm talking to the dog. Yes, I'm not getting in any way inappropriate with anybody else. I'm just petting the dog. That's
The dog
all I'm
finds
doing.
that very appropriate.
Yes, he does. But learning about the conflict between weight and the Thelema. Crowley. Yes. Alistair, Uncle Al. There was so much there, and so much that was being discovered, maybe taken. Sometimes, and legends cropping up that we began to propagate in, I think, the 70s and 80s as the tarot started to find its way back into our zeitgeist, I guess you could say, our modern thinking and way of expressing ourselves. The Order of the Golden Dawn did tap into some of, or at least made up some kind of rituals that reflected Egyptian iconography, the names and places of and themes even that could be construed as ancient Egyptian. And so there's even the story now that the tarot comes from the Egyptians, and it's like, no, leave the Egyptians alone. Just leave the poor people alone. It's not from what I understand, if I have this correctly, the playing cards came to us, and when I say us, I mean Western Europeans, through Marco Polo and the Italian traders who contacted and connected with and began trading with the Chinese. The Chinese had been using cards for playing, for games, and I think also for gambling, for who knows how long. And so that made its way into Western society, 13th century maybe, kind of just before the plague. And then they began to be the idea of the cards as for example, in the Italian, in the upper circles of the Italians, they would there were decks of cards created for the ducal layer of society, the nobles, and because they were the only ones who could afford it, basically. And they would have conversations about different concepts and ideas, like Plato's Symposium, kind of writ large and into the public life. And the cards would reflect different areas and aspects of that. And it wasn't really a game at that point. It was more just like a talking piece or a set. And these different elements, or the different suits, began to be built into it, and the different, like the major and minor arcanas, began to be solidified. And then, of course, we see by the late 17th, early 18th century, the French had developed a pretty solid tarot deck, and it was used for gambling and divination. It's kind of as an aside, it's kind of my own practice. I do like to gamble every now and again, and I see it as kind of a divinatory practice. There are elements that are the same. And so anyway, just as a little aside there, little much ado about me. Anyway, so, and then of course it found its way into the kind of the parlors of the not necessarily, well, nobles, yes, but polite society, say. And the divination became it became more of a woman's art and less something that was taken seriously as a way of actually, finding the truth about the questions of life. Divination was a big deal, mentioning the plague, back in the 14th century when the plague hit. And they were talking to the astrologers, and there weren't doctors as such, but they, at least not necessarily like the medical doctors that we have today. They were asking, they were telling the Pope, that he had to, sit between two fires, and the prayers, and offering up, and it's like the only reason he survived is that nobody came near him. It had nothing to do with it. He was isolated. Go figure. So anyway, I'm not sure what question got me onto that particular digression. But see, now this is what happens
if
when
you need to survive a plague. Now you know.
Now you know.
Surround yourself with tarot cards.
Yes, surround yourself.
And
All right.
fires.
I have a
And fires,
question.
yes.
This might be a silly question or not an answerable question, but if somebody wanted to know the future of books and publishing, is there a tarot spread they could use for that?
Is there okay, so let me tell you that you can create a spread for anything.
Okay.
You can. So any question that you have, you can create a spread as long as it is within like ethical realm, so that you're asking for yourself and about yourself, and you're not asking about how to take down, any other publisher or anything like that.
Oh, we
That
can't
would be so mean.
destroy Amazon with a tarot
No.
spread.
Oh, Amazon. That's not even fair
I
game?
think Amazon is kind of built on the seeds of its own destruction.
Oh.
Frankly, that's kind of what I think.
That is a very,
So
very
let
good
them
point.
take themselves down.
Okay,
It's
okay.
kind
Been
of,
their own undoing so
yes,
far. yeah.
exactly.
It's true.
Kind of.
Okay.
So
Thank
just.
you for that.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's I'm here all week.
We need to have religious perspectives on the podcast more often. I feel like that is in fact what we've been missing.
Calms us
Alright.
down.
Yeah, just kind of, well, and I because I was actually thinking about that the other day, a little bit of a digression, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, about Amazon, because of another friend of mine who's also written a book, my dear friend and sister Anastasia, loathes Amazon, loathes them, and I don't blame her one little bit.
Neither do we.
Yes, and
My feelings are top secret.
yeah. And I started thinking, I'm like, why do I use Amazon? And mostly it's because of convenience.
Sure.
And then there are a couple of times where if I went to a product's website to buy it from them directly, which is what I try to do, is my carbon footprint going to be enormous, like getting something from China
Right.
or from Italy or something like that. If I can't do without it, or I can't find it cheaper elsewhere, do I just give up and get it from Amazon? And then I'm like, okay, yeah, I do. But I'm starting to, that's, like if people start thinking that way or thinking like that, that's what I mean when I say that Amazon is going to, kind of contain the seeds of its own destruction. That it's almost getting to be too big.
Yeah.
It's now it's developed a relationship with the NFL, and I'm thinking that the National Football League, for people who don't follow football or sports, they've gotten in bed with football, and I think that's going to take over, and that could be the breakup of Amazon. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know.
So say a publisher maybe did have Amazon's destruction on their heart, but wanted to ethically produce a Tarot spread to help guide us through the uncertain waters of this industry.
Yes.
Surviving Amazon's destruction.
Yeah. How would we do that?
Okay, so what I would do would be to begin with either a card or a series of cards, so between 1 and 3 cards, because otherwise it's going to get to be too big and too unwieldy and you'll lose the thread. Mm-hmm. So starting small is usually a good idea, and then starting with the question of okay, what is my situation right now? Mm-hmm. Show me, pick one card that says this is where you are right now, and then another card that's what's happening right now that I'm not seeing that can hurt me, and because that's so valuable to be able to know. And this is one that I got from my friend Anastasia. What am I not seeing that can hurt me, and what am I not seeing that can help me? And that'll give you kind of a big picture of where you are right now. And then and it'll include obviously the information about what you're not aware of, what you're not seeing, what's happening behind you, what's coming up behind you, because there may be new technologies coming up that will affect publishing, that will affect all of the aspects of business that Amazon is involved in, that could trip them up, that you don't know about, you're not aware about. And then the next phase would be okay, what's coming? And without getting too deeply into fortune telling, because if you're going to do fortune telling, do fortune telling. Oops. I'm attacking the equipment here. If you're asking about your own future, that's one thing. Yeah. But if you're asking about the future writ large, including the entirety of a culture or a society, that gets a little dicey.
I guess publishing is kind of similar to Tarot in that, it hasn't really changed in 100 years.
Yes, it hasn't. And yet, the changes, the realms that are now available for people to publish, to self-publish, as well as to get their own work before a publisher, are crazy. So many opportunities exist, and whereas the idea of self-publishing was kind of anathema 20 years ago, now more and more people are doing it because it's kind of the vox populi. The only way some people can get their work out. And, it's not necessarily any indication of the quality of the material.
So what made you decide to work with a publisher like us instead of self-publishing?
Well, I was actually going to self-publish, but I wanted to give working with a publisher a try. And you guys were the second publisher I approached about this idea. I went to Llewellyn first, with apologies. And
no offense taken.
We're recovering.
Okay. Yes, of course, you're over it. And then when I spoke with there was you had a representative at the Northwest Tarot Symposium.
Could have been Jerry or maybe Lydia.
I think it was Lydia.
It was Lydia.
Okay. They were they also your editor?
Yeah, they were my editor, my first editor, and they were wonderful. And they were.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
On Twitter at microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at microcosm_pub.
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.
Well, I think as long as he doesn't fart, I'll be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, he is
No
definitely.
promises, but
He's not really given to
Don't
it.
do me dirty all there, Bernie.
Bernie,
It's
for
comfy.
people who are listening by via audio, the dog is being extremely cute and disruptive.
Yes, he is. He's being a doll. And then the energies for the full moon are much more expansive. And so